Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Morning.
Good morning. Nice event yesterday. It was nice.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So glad you were there. Adam, are you joining us with anything other than not being here, like video or audio?
That means if I do something else. If I do something else, what's your question?
No, I was saying to our other friend Adam that he's here, but no video or audio. So, the audio.
Okay.
Good morning.
Yeah, but good morning. I have two kids in the background here, and I'm alone with them. So I just want to listen in and maybe sneak away if it's something that I have to say.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. So it's now exactly the time. So I will delete everything in the recording before now and say good morning. And thank you guys for yesterday. It was
pleasure.
Fun. It was quite relaxing, wasn't it? It wasn't too stressful, or I don't know. What were the interpretations of the people in the room where it happened?
Yeah, I had a nice time. I enjoyed listening to the conversations, and the first one, I forgot his name already, but I have a tab open, which is the artwork not generative, but with text, and it just looked so beautiful, the layouts and everything.
Yeah, Sam
really enjoyed.
Really interesting.
Sam.
Came across him on Twitter, and then we had lunch at my club, and he brought a book for Edgar, which was super sweet. So to see it in the flesh, as it were, was a really interesting experience. Yeah.
Yes. So I only bought 2 books yesterday, and they were both his.
Nice.
And Brandel, thank you for coming back. What was your impression of yesterday?
It was very exciting to find a community of people who have an interest in constructing tools around text and who are aware of what opportunities there are to reimagine the sort of the context around what we do with computers and text, because as you all have come to realize, it's not as common a frame of reference as one would hope.
Yeah, that's my life in a sentence. So thanks. Alain, thank you for coming back. You were happy with yesterday as well?
Yeah, sure. It's always interesting, and my passion for text is it's a long journey, because I start early in the Macintosh world. 2 applications, Think and Time, and also Marco Polo, and they were in the field of groupware. There's playing with text and document were always a passion for me. And as you know, we are working on a new tool. We plan to let's say be a real new tool in this field, because it's really interesting, because we have so many new tools for the thinking, and also for taking notes, and also to bring content and knowledge to others. There's I think it's the right moment. The momentum is really nice, and you do a good job for making people aware that text is always valuable, because video is a big trend, but text is supporting the video, and I'm sure that it's a good moment. I like your job, and I think everyone involved in this field knows that there were many people in the past, like looking about Paul Otley, or many coming from the, let's say, 50 or 40 years ago, also working with a good vision, and the vision are now going through this. It's nice.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about what your software does? I know about it, but not everyone.
The name is Squidzy. The purpose of the software is letting people creating stories around their document and their text. That means You can create many documents on your PC or your Mac, but it's sometimes difficult to explain the sequence of your story. And when you drop document in Dropbox or in your folders, you have nothing that explains the link between your document. What we provide with Quidsi, it's a tool that creates story and that let people create their own text, and they can also add media files and many other stuff, and they can encapsulate all of their document inside a playlist where people can share with others, and also let people co-authoring a playlist. That means if you want to share something about a new topic, and you are working with 2 or 3 members of your group, everyone can add their document and create their playlist and can add value to the playlist by adding text, adding many other media file. And the idea is to let people share and their content, share their knowledge, and also the authors, because it can be coaching, can track progress of learning and also to track approvals. And we will add also the dimension of adding comments. That means people can really interact with their story, the document story.
Well, that's interesting.
The software is all, the application. We went from SkillPass to Quidsi. In fact, in the past we were working during this year on the project called SkillPass, but we thought that going only for learning was perhaps a mistake, because there are so many tools. Even if Quidsi is, let's say, innovative, we decide to extend the broad of this kind of architecture. That means not only learning, but also broadcasting any comment, any content, any knowledge, any source of content that must be shared amongst a group, amongst a team, enterprise, or internet. Internet will be coming later. It will be mostly a group of a team work tool. But and we are just closing the final feature for beta. We plan to release it during December or early 2022. Sorry. And the idea now is to have people involved and add other comments and add value to during this beta period. Sorry for my English. It's French speaking.
Oh, no problem at all. I'm sure the transcription software may have an issue, but we absolutely do not. Transcription.
We're close also.
It's not the best.
GPT-3 is not far.
Yeah. Just before, Jure, it'd be nice if you also comment and introduce yourself, but I'm looking at what Adam said here. I really like the format with short recorded presentations and discussions after would be perfect with themed meetings. So Adam, all the Future of Text prior have been exactly that. Bam, 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 but really hardcore on the clock. Yesterday, I decided to be completely soft just to see how it worked, and that was fine. So for our monthly meetings, yeah, I think probably we would start with a 5 or 10 minute presentation by a person of their book, their software, whatever it is, and then have the conversation go roughly within that realm. We all agree that that's probably a good route forward, right? Does it, when
I like the format with short presentations. Sometimes, if, for example, thinking about if we're going to do this every month for a guest speaker, sometimes since it's going to be a more focused presentation, maybe the presentation can be even a little bit longer, and that would be totally fine, depending on how long we're going to stay discussing. If we're going to be for an hour, then the presentation can be a little bit longer as well, because there's so many interesting things, and I would love to hear more from people and their ideas and their projects.
Adam is saying the opposite. One keeps having multiple ones on the same topic. I can kind of see that, like yesterday, but that's a huge amount of work to have more than one presentation a month to organize it. So I'm thinking, if we look at this the longer term, so that we do this every month. That means in a year, we will have 12 of these, plus the normal meetings. So if we look at it like a podcast format, which is what you've been talking about forever, Rafael, and I agree, we release them on YouTube, but also in some kind of an RSS, so people can tune in and just listen to the presentation and stop. But if they want to, they can listen to the dialogue afterwards, right? So that makes sense. And they listen as long as deep as they want. Okay. Jury.
And they can even jump between time codes, I guess.
Yeah, that becomes very interesting. Jury, would you like to comment on yesterday and introduce yourself briefly, please? Are you magically muted?
No, I know.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was really interesting. I think this short presentation indeed worked very well, and it's good the discussion went on. I'm sorry I had to leave early, but I did manage to catch up with the recording, so that's great. I didn't miss David Wolf demo, as I was able to watch it today. I think that was really good. And I mean, to introduce myself, I really think that I'm a kind of born-again Engelbartian much later. I think I just about discovered Engelbart about 10 years ago, Frode, and it took me a couple of years to find your stuff, but actually I got most of my introduction from your Unfinished Revolution and all that stuff. I'm not sure people are aware of that. I mean, you're not advertising it enough, you know. That there's a oh, sorry, that's what I meant. Yes, that was another conference. Yeah,
he had
there was another event. I've just got the terms mixed up.
No, that's
yeah. So I think that really needs to be advertised more broadly. In fact, just one sentence. I mean, in fact, in my PhD thesis, which was language-oriented programming in metalism, I effectively rediscovered, reinvented the command language interpreter idea that actually made the mother of all demos possible. So I really think that, and I just learned the other day, which is very interesting, that Alanke's 69 thesis is about reactive engines and syntax-directed computing. So in fact, that was really in the air at the time. So I just learned about it later. But I'm basically interested in obviously tools for thought, whatever you like to call them. But I'm interested in this in Web3. So I'm really pushing for a new way of doing things, which is I don't know anybody aware of this, but the interpretable file system basically gives you something that Alan Morrison's called the anti-database, which is, what if the entire network becomes the database? That changes everything, because then that really means you can actually create a global giant interpersonal graph of knowledge, because everything is just one hash away. So I don't know, and so I'm really spearheading this revolution. I call it Indiverse, and you can find me on Twitter and there's trail marks. But I want to point you to this a few Tools for Thought Rocks, or this community which started about 6 months ago, which is actually around Fission, who is one of the most empowering players in this space. So they really are kind of constellation providers for web native applications. I go with that, and I would like to, my goal is to really be a constellation provider for intentional software and kind of symmetry, mutual learning. So that's where I am. And my main concern is indeed interoperability. The whole point is that the essence of this new Web3 world is Fission, web native. That's why I'm supporting them. That it changes the game, because it means the application comes to you to work on your data, instead of you going somewhere, someplace where you leave your data. Now that's just wrong. And now there is no I'm not the only one who is doing this. but it really, I urge everybody interested in tools for thought or whatever, stop creating new silos. It's trivial to make it really commons based. And in fact, one of the technologies that are developing called TrailHub or IndieHub will be open source, and the whole point is that it takes you nothing to take your existing centralized tool to become commons based. So I hope one of the next time or whatever, I will be able to present this both at that venue and hopefully to present it to you as well. So because the actual core of it is very simple. It's easy. I mean, the first thing that I'm shipping, we are actually, is IndieWiki or IndieWiki, which is basically realizing that I really would like to do with Web3 what Walt Cunningham did for Web 2, because in a way the wiki created was really the maker app for the Web 2, and I really want to make it a maker app precisely because it is really, I'm not selling a product, I'm selling a stone for everybody's stone soup. That's the idea, you know. This is what Jerry said, and finish on this. I really want this to be easy to emulate, compelling to do. So just the same way as Walt Cunningham, you know, he didn't sit on his idea, oh, isn't it nice, we can do some collaborative editing. Just by showing an example, inspired 1,000 wikis. So I'm really approaching the same from this angle.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.
So two things. First of all, Mark is asking, what is the Doug piece you referred to? Doug Engelbart.
The command line interpreter. If you go and research it, that's what Jeff Ruffinson invented, if you like, on the fly. Because what their problem was that they got a couple of $1 million machine every 6 months because they grown it out. You know, we're talking about 128K or something, some ridiculous tiny capabilities. So they had to build a system the way it should be done. This is the way what I'm trying to do is bootstrapping in the technical sense, is have a tiny little kernel, 10,000 line program. And that's really a syntax directed program, which basically call the routines. So the actual thing that did the event handling is one, and you can take it as is from one machine to the other and just have to recode the low-level primitives. That's the command language interpreter. So it combined two things. It combined the idea of bootstrapping and also combined the idea is really language-oriented programming in the sense that software design or program design can be reduced to language design. So all those clicks or all those interactions, all those characters had a kind of language, and that was mapped into the right combination of procedures. And so that's Engelbart. And actually, if you no, I don't think I should have I think I should have an annotation on that, which should link the two. I will dig it out, but not now. I will let you know. Yeah. So that really is. I mean, it's amazing what they've done. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's the same that I mean, Alan Kay did this with Smalltalk. It was completely bootstrapped. The entire system is 10,000 lines of code. And in fact, in 2016, Alan Kay with many others, they built an operating system, an entire system, which is as good as knows everything that Windows does it better, and literally 1,000 times less code, and nobody interested. There's no money in there. Yeah.
So I see, Mark, you have your hand up, and also Brandel. It would be really nice if you could talk about your work. But at this point, I think it would be really useful to just stop and go meta. Haha, meta. Because we're trying to build a record here. And so much of what we're doing now will just be kind of lost. We'll have it transcribed. It will be lots of ums and ahs and awful. And we don't actually have the money to have someone human go in and edit it. So I'm wondering a few things. First of all, can we, like we looked at a little bit yesterday, add more to the chat? And should we maybe hire someone, maybe a student interested in this, to join us, whose primary job is to just write notes? Because if you have the chat connected to the video, connected to the transcript, it's a lot easier to go through, because what Yuri just said is really, really worthwhile, and it's really citable. Someone should be able to cite in a paper, Jury said this about Doug, this is interesting, but our current means don't really allow that to happen. So yeah, let's just think about that a bit. And Mark, let's continue with you actually, because reflection on yesterday is useful. I would like to spend more time on Brandel properly.
Sure, I just wanted to, that's fine. So help for new faces. I'll rattle through a couple of things. A thought that was in my mind after Adam's comment about, number of intros. One thing is perhaps have a bit more, when we do a presentation, have a bit more context setting. Because the presenter, unless they're a regular part of the sort of conclave, will arrive with a presentation. And obviously they'll be presenting about their thing and they'll have a close relationship with it. And I think it's useful to just have a little scaffolding, especially for the later listeners, as to sort of how and why this relates to the future of text. And I know future of text is a broad church, but nonetheless, I think it's quite useful to say, okay, today someone is going to show X, where X sort of fits in this overall picture. It's in this sort of area. And I think that actually makes it then more accessible, especially for those watching it, in some asynchronous time later. Anyway, passing thought. I really actually
hang on that point. Just on that point, you're all watching the Foundation, right? Did you see the season finale last night?
Yes. Yeah.
If you didn't, close your ears for a second.
No spoilers. No spoilers.
Okay, close your ears. When what's his face says, "I don't curate knowledge, I curate people."
Yeah.
That's okay. You can listen.
No, I get that point. Yeah.
Safe to listen. Okay. Safe
I take that point.
The reason I made a throwaway comment about I haven't wanted to put too much of my own stamp on this. That's why I've been really only saying, these are the right people to be in the book. But I think Alain's thing about a playlist for documents, I know you're doing more, but that actual aspect is really, really fascinating because, Mark, yes, we do need ways to provide context. So I don't mind if I'm not saying that necessarily I should provide an introduction and see who this is.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's even if it's just some brief conversation before the presentation.
No, but hang on. What we can do is ask the people doing the presentation saying, this is the format. For the first 30 seconds, you have to say who you are and how you see how this work fits, right? I think what you're saying is really, really useful. What's the best way to make that happen? Because yes, we want new people to come in. Do you guys have any ideas for how we should do that kind of formatting?
I'd be tempted actually to do, it doesn't need to be you. I take your point about having sort of too much of an apparent authorial voice. I think it's because also it can be hard as the presenter because someone says, explain where you fit in this. Well, you may not necessarily be sure. And probably your mind is, especially if you're deep in a sort of project. And what you'll tend to naturally do is to try and situate your product in the wider thing. In the reverse way to the way we want, which is for the audience. Oh, right. So here in our sort of very broad explaining thing, roughly in this area, or these areas, it's not to pigeonhole things. It's just, okay, so the thing we're about to listen to relates to this. I think, oh, right. So, and that means that thing we listened to 2 weeks ago, that sort of fits there. It's doing that sort of scaffolding, which probably those closer to the ongoing conversation are better able to do. And it's meant to no detriment to the presenters. It's not to say they, and also it leaves them more time to present what they know well. So they don't have this sort of burden of thinking, oh, well, it's going to be a car crash for the first 30 seconds because they'll probably describe it all wrong. Well, anyway, I'm not. It's not a hard point. Observation anyway.
I think it's a really important point, Mark, but also some people will be new, and we have a guinea pig here. Brandel is going to tell us about his work in a minute. So it may be interesting if I ask you, Brandel, to say, okay, I'll give you the context for even what I'm going to say. I've had the problem of the last 20 years of struggling with, I believe, future of text, big deal. If we don't deal with it as a species, we're kind of screwed. You know, everybody here shares some degree of that feeling. So then when I write a big flowery thing and poetic thing and inspire people, and people love my writing, and it's very nice, they say, oh yeah, that's verbiage. But then when I build software, they say, oh, you're just trying to make money. You know, these two things have been fought and fought. And I've been lucky enough to have some nice lunches with Alan Kay. And he says to me, yeah, but you can do it. It's not like Nike, you can do it. It's not like, yes, you can, Obama, but it's almost like I'm being a pathetic child who doesn't realize that we do have the tools and libraries and APIs, like Jury was saying. Yeah, we can actually do this. That's all he's saying. And he's saying he has never given me a huge compliment for being a genius. However, he has said, I have enthusiasm. All of us here, that's all we need is enthusiasm, right? Doug himself was worried about someone saying, well, who the hell are you? You know, so we don't need to worry about that. But the reason I'm mentioning Alan Kay is primarily his sentence, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. That's how I justify having spent my family money on the software. So all of that stuff was to say, Brandel, when you introduce yourself in your work now, I would really like to know what you're selling. Right? And if you're selling...
You mean selling in the loose sense?
No, I mean selling in every sense.
Mind share, you know.
No.
What's your value proposition?
No, I actually think selling, it's a bit provocative, as I can see from the reaction here. But I remember even when I was pre-software doing my liquid information philosophy, a few people said, what are you selling? I got so offended. I'm not selling, I'm just sharing my philosophy. Oh. But okay, let's put it in, okay, we're learning here. I'm saying head shakes. How about we ask Brandel to say, in the very, very beginning, what he feels the key takeaway should be? You know, what is the one thing you really want us to understand from your perspective? Is that a more useful way of doing it?
Okay. So can I just interrupt very, very briefly to go back to the question about how we're going to make these videos resources? And I would like to make a suggestion. There is this amazing tool called DocDrop. I put it in the link, which basically, if you got a video which is on YouTube, and it got machine-generated crap subtitles with annotations, people can crowdsource, you know, pick the bit that is relevant to them, correct the text in the annotation if you like, and next time they could actually put a link to a conversation that is related to that. That's possible. But even without that next step, that would be valuable, and that also the annotations can be curated, so you end up with the text is converted by the people when they watch and find something useful. I got all the videos I watch now. I do that, and I will do this to yesterday's, right, as soon as it got a text. And I just annotate the bit that I resonated with. And if anybody goes in and does that, you will end up with a crowdsourced version.
We'll have a look at that. We're also using Descript right now to do a basic version as well. But okay, after all of that,
okay, that was just a technical issue, so I wanted to.
No, but that's great, and that is exactly the kind of thing we need to look at. But yeah, Brandel, center stage. You haven't been asked to present anything, but would you please do as you feel like?
Sure. No, this is really exciting. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to kind of explain my thesis in the soft sense. So early on in terms of my introduction to the community. One of the first things that sort of triggered my interest is in terms of text. I will start by talking about another of the sort of the basic and fundamental apps is a calculator. Many years ago, I interviewed at a company, and because they use a bespoke language, they wrote it from the ground up because they thought it would be better. They were wrong, but that's by the by. It was in order to make sure that people could actually work there was to build a calculator within the language, and so I did. I wrote the basic calculator that we sort of all understand to be the way that a calculator should work. And once I was finished with all of the basic functionality, I said, "What else do you want me to write? What do you want me to make the calculator do?" And they said, "I don't know. What do you think a calculator should do?" So I then proceeded to write a design document for what is it? Why do we have a calculator? To what benefit is it? What are the mental models it's supposed to be supporting? What are the typical contexts in which we use it? And lo and behold, for the next 18 months, the company decided to sort of pursue that as an application because they were so excited by the idea that somebody would go back to what the first principles of what a calculator actually achieves for people, focusing on that, and so that was a really interesting sort of reminder that just because we have a well-formed notion of what a particular sort of solution domain is to a fundamental problem like calculation, it's very different to actually go, well, now that we know a little bit more about what people want to do, why they make use of this tool, we can solve it a little better. And so with that in mind, once I started thinking seriously about virtual reality in about 2013, 2014, I was really compelled to think somewhat obtusely about the sort of notionally most boring application you could apply to it, which was word processing. What would word processing be like in virtual reality? And so in the sort of long exploration of that, I started to realize that word, as everybody else here has discovered, is that the manipulation of symbols and ideas is the most fundamental and central sort of thing that a computer can be used for. And if you have the ability to improve some aspect of that, even in some small way, then you've improved computing and you've improved human comprehension in the most substantial way that it probably can be done. But also through that, I realized that it wasn't necessary to exclusively target virtual reality, but that if you simply take a mind to what it is that people experience, how they think, based on the many decades now of neuroscience and behavioral psychology that we now have the benefit of since the initial inception of the Bravo interface and the hypertext demos that were coming out of SRI and Park, that we could probably do a lot better. And so that's what I've been kind of pursuing personally. So in my professional experience is as an interactive graphics engineer, primarily involved in advertising and marketing. So I work for advertising campaigns for folks like PlayStation, Coca-Cola, and for the last 7 years I've been at Apple. So I've had the benefit of being able to work very closely with folks in Safari and other places where hopefully I'll be able to make a dent in some of these people's thinking. But the passion really is sort of separate to that, and in how we can change what we do with computers based on a better understanding of what we are as people. And so to that end, I've been making a number of fairly uninvested, unopinionated demos and explorations of various aspects of that. So in 2017, I built a virtual reality-based word processor where rather than having a single canonical document, you dealt with sort of disconnected text fragments in the same way that a lot of authors sort of move small pieces of paper around to assemble and edit. And that was very interesting. I attacked the question of the sort of the modality of writing because I think that we have over-indexed the concept of writing as being the sort of mechanical input technique. And so by leveraging things like speech and other gestural actions, we can potentially find ways that can come up with that. We can come up with modalities that are a little bit more fluid in terms of the writing editing kind of divide. And most recently, I've been, for example, building visual representations, compelling high fidelity representations of text artifacts in the form of books and other things that we can see, manipulate, and use to reflect on our kind of responses to our artifacts as they're presented in different kind of different ways. So how, for example, a Wikipedia article sort of appears to us if it's presented as though it's a museum or an art gallery exhibit, because you have the ability to do that in virtual reality. What is the significance of that, and what's the significance of being able to make something look like a hardbound book when, say, it's just somebody's tweet or a thread or your browser history, those kinds of things. So yeah, that's me and where I am, what I'm doing with it, and I'm really excited to be able to present some of these things in a little bit more detail, but also really excited to listen to the community of people who are building these things. I was very excited to see Barbara Tversky in the audience, and very excited to hear her that she will be presenting at one of your next monthlies, because I really enjoyed her book Mind in Motion and her presentation when she came to Beikai. I'm in the Bay Area in California, and have been surprised at the lack of interest in these kinds of subjects. And so even if I have to connect with people at 7 a.m. in Pacific, I'm happy to do so, because it's really great to join a community. That's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and welcome aboard. That was very fascinating.
What was the word you used? Something Dalik for the visual presentation?
I write it by hand. So I use WebGL and
yeah, but no,
WebXR.
you said something like not psychedelic, but something delic. What was that word you used when you described these new modalities in the for text to be presented in VR? You used a word for it, which I didn't quite catch.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Happy-delic or haptodelic, I don't know. Something delic. I don't know what was that word you okay, we can go back in the recording, but I just didn't catch the word. Okay, well, that's fine, sorry.
It's so interesting to hear what you're saying, because I have been kind of locked into specific aspects of text because I think they need to be solved. I have shied away from VR and AR like crazy, but I feel that we're at a stage where we have to look at this. And last night, my son Edgar, whom you all met a little bit yesterday, 4.5, we were watching a bit of music video thing on the big projector downstairs in the living room. And he said, "What website is this?" You know, I've never mentioned that word to him. You know, it's not a website. Why? I want to help the children. So we now have something called Children in Need. It's a charity here in England. They did money at a school and so on. So I had to explain to him, no, we have to go to the website, the computer upstairs and so on. So it's so nice in this context that his mind is comprehending the possibilities, obviously completely different from us old people. Mm-hmm. So to really listen, you know, okay, could there be a website on the TV? Yeah, of course there could be, and that has been done, but what would that mean? And so Brandel, the bigger issues you're talking about is phenomenally interesting. Yes, I think we should have you present maybe the one after Barbara, because it kind of builds on it in a way. What do you think?
I'd be perfectly thrilled to slot in wherever it feels appropriate. I'm happy to go through some of these things in more detail one-on-one for you to decide what kind of appropriate fit, or just launch into it if you're comfortable with that too. Yeah, that would be really cool.
Yeah, it just seems very, very related. I mean, Barbara Tversky, I also just got her book and loved it, found contacted. Now she's on our book. It's amazing how that works. You know, I don't know if you guys have felt the same about looking back in history, scientists or literature people, and they were connected. So we should, gosh darn, be connected too, right? And it's exciting.
Definitely.
So, I liked Brandel's something that sparked my sort of mind as to Brandel was this idea of doing, say, a sort of visualization of something like Wikipedia as a room. It sparked in my mind because my own recent thesis work was all on based on Wikipedia in a completely different, unrelated area. But suffice it to say, I spent more time than perhaps I should have looking at Wikipedia and that sort of things. Why it piqued my interest is that one of the someone's interested in hypertext. I'm often in sort of knowledge relationships. I'm often as interested in it's the problem of the unknown unknowns, looking for the links that aren't there. Why are these islands? So, in my mind's eye, as you were saying that, so yes, sort of, it's another way to visualize that what we see presented in its main presentational form as a long form continuous text may actually be very disjointed and either full of holes or basically entirely consisting of portals to somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So that visualization aspect is an interesting way of bringing that out, which I sort of find far more compelling than. There is a great fascination of 3D because somehow, well, people keep saying it to me, but every time I don't quite get what the extra D does for me. And I sort of think, it always makes me think of those sort of early wireframe things used in, sci-fi movies when they go, "Ooh, we can do 3D now." And you think, yes, I wonder. And yet you're pointing to a much more subtle and really interesting way of using that extra dimension, to help bring things to the fore. So I found that very interesting.
Yeah, so the museum piece was sort of just to reproduce. I went to a Stanley Kubrick exhibition in the Bay Area many years ago, and was struck by it was great, but also struck by the fact that it was essentially just it could be regarded as a printout and the typographic treatment equivalent of just getting a Wikipedia article, and as well as rendering the real artifacts that have HAL 9000 and stuff like that. But to your point about what does one do with the extra D, a subsequent thing, I linked it to Frode already, but is a Wikipedia browser virtual reality thing, which is it's still up and possible to look at. And what that does with the extra D explicitly is rather than merely being a Wikipedia sort of equivalent or analog, it takes all of the dates in a Wikipedia article and linearizes them into a list where you have 1910, 1920, 1930. And so you put those things at those times, and it does it per paragraph or per sentence where a date appears. It's not perfect, but it's really meant as a provocation of what is it that we would do with these Ds. What I then do with those Ds is I put multiple articles next to each other. So you have hypertext, you have the Cold War, you have the internet, and you can see all of those things next to each other. You can look at the article on Project Xanadu, and so that you can see what happens in 1957 with the Sputnik moment. If anybody's read Brian Deere's great book, The Friendly Orange Glow, on Plato Project at University of Illinois, and see it's very, very clear that these are the sort of the prevailing events. And one of the things that I really enjoy about that, the way I explain it more generally, Mark, is that what the extra D gives you is space. It's real estate. When we have computer screens, we have such a limited capacity to kind of place things in the field of view into the sort of perceptual awareness of the user or the viewer. Virtual reality, immersive computing generally, just gives you the ability to be a little bit more even-handed with how you present those things, the context in which they can be, and so that they can be simply just a little bit more ambiently available. And that's the thing that I'm most excited about, and what sort of carries through most of my work.
That's a lovely exposition, and I like the fact, sort of in a sense, a deliberate use of the extra dimension. Because if I sounded slightly so pejorative earlier, it's just that all too often I see someone said, it's like, oh, and let's turn it up to 11, well, no, it hasn't worked. But I really like that. And the other thing that I think will interest those who are here a lot is this mention of the timeline, which is the temporal axis is generally massively underdeveloped in a lot of presentations, and probably to our cost in terms of trying to make sense of things. Anyway, unless someone else got a word in edgeways. I think Alan had this.
Yeah. I got 3 words to get in edgeways. 3 sentences. Number 1, yesterday was also the launch of Battlefield 2042. So if you want to look at, games are hugely inspirational. it's so gosh darn massive. You can actually get lost. It's huge. And you have the interactions that are so crazy, but it's for a specific kind of thing. A little thing, Brendel, on the whole extra real estate, foveal vision, I think is really, really important. I use a 13-inch machine now. I used to use bigger ones, but most of my customers use small ones because they're students. And also I find it easier and more comfortable to have just this space to work on when I'm writing. But of course, you're doing something else. You want this, when I was doing graphic design, I used to work at CKS down the valley from where you are. They became March 1st, and doing graphic design would be monitors absolutely everywhere. So we do share a common past in a way. But hang on, my thoughts. There was another thing. Oh gosh, darn, this is so annoying. Oh yes, timeline. So Brandel, you saw my presentation on visual meta yesterday, and I hope you liked it. But before I ask you for your opinion, so the way visual meta works in a bit extended way is that at the end of the document, it has glossary terms in visual meta. So it can. So the thing is, we all agree that organizing information is important, categorizing, tagging is important, but we also agree that it's really boring and expensive to do. That's why in this software, as a student, you define stuff, you characterize it, and oh my gosh, I got a glossary for free, right? So in our Future of Text Volume 1 and Volume 2, there's also a timeline, which generally edited by me, and I have lots of lovely people helping. It's formatted very simply. But if we could maybe natively with that, or through visual meta intervention for extra markup, to be able to explode a timeline like that, plus any time-related information in the book itself, into the kind of space you're talking about, would be really interesting, don't you think?
Absolutely. And actually, one of the projects that I haven't mentioned, because I don't have a good quality artifact of it at this point, but I need to build it because I owe it to the Safari team as well. To the point of the onerousness of the construction of that information is a visual sort of tab-centric or activity-centric history-based browser history representation that I think it may not do the job that's sort of requisite in visual meta, but it is a very useful piece of sort of sidecar information, which is rather than representing browser history as just a series of the right now it's terrible. It's just when you opened a tab. But there are at least two very important times in a tab's life, when you open it and when you close it. But there is also which tab you opened it from, which document, as well as what you did in it. And those things can and probably should all be encodable. I wrote a browser plugin for Firefox 2.4 many years ago that encoded and recorded all of these things so that you had the ability to recognize that the entire series of trees of browser history. And so I was really excited to see that the cards concept and why I was curious about the authorship aspect of that, because it is interesting to think about the way in which some of that information can be kind of encoded incidentally as a consequence of people's natural behavior within it.
So you're basically thinking about Vannevar Bush's.
Yes.
Trip. So okay.
Well, yes.
Well, that's all.
Can I
I think we should all do this right now.
Yeah, I think I wrote WebTrails exactly that for Chrome, and this is why what I'm doing is called trail marks. Precisely, because that and in fact I turned it into a graph and I still got it, but that's what led to trail marks, because that's good. Even if you got this whole history of your trails, what you need is really at every point to add some content. So to contextualize, and so that's really what led to trademark, which eventually now it's everything. It's the annotations, your history, and your real the connections that are emerging, whether you put it in explicitly or actually discovered. So and you end up with it, as you just said. I think it's very important with tabs. I focus on tabs, but basically using this, yes, you quite, it's so important where you come from. That's that. In fact, in my work, the most important thing that I put is where did I get here from? That's the most important information. How did you get here? Because if you build it, you really have to change. You really have the context.
So and then the next important thing is what happened next.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So it's nice to see somebody else doing the same thing. Yes, because problems define their own solution. That's what I believe. Yeah, thank you.
So a wonderful case study for that might be any kind of a researcher, student or professional or business or whatever. I know I'm talking stuff you know, Brandel, I'm just thinking out loud. Having a specific session saying, I'm doing work now. And at the end of that session, they found something useful. To go back to see what you have would be really, really wonderful. But then, as we also talked about sharing earlier, I believe, or the kind of openness in some sort, if they could then put that into a document in a usable form, and of course, I'm thinking about visual meta, where they copy that session, put it in a word processor, either as a chart or as plain text or whatever, in a way you can do exactly what Yuri said, annotated, saying, so instantly it fills it in. This is where I went wrong. I had to backtrack. That could be phenomenally useful and time-saving and helping a teacher understand how the student got there and another researcher understanding it. So I know I'm repeating you guys. I just wanted to say that's really interesting.
Yes, absolutely. There was a paper at I think it was at WIST recently called tabs.do that had a task-centric perspective on the preservation of tab groups. I know Chrome, Safari, all of the browsers at this point have also included tab groups, but I would argue that they haven't gone as far as they could. This paper sort of presents a possible sort of frame of reference for it in that way. But I do also believe and agree that the idea of having kind of a semantic classification and potentially clustering sort of representation like visual meta could be a really valuable addition to sort of encoding those things.
Links, please, Brando. Could you
sure,
give us a link for this? It sounds so
interesting. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I can annotate it and we can have conversation on the annotations, on the margins. Yeah.
Mr. Anderson, absolutely. Single UI any software developer such as myself should try to make a single UI for everything. But the information and API should allow everybody to compete. So
it's terribly easy to sound sort of negative in saying what I said, which isn't the thing. It's not to say that if something only has one UI, then it's rubbish. Far from it. I think it's just that in truth, it's shown. Various presentations we have, an awful lot of work, a lot of work goes into just making even one thing. So to glibly say, well, we must have more, and paradoxically, you might have said it was easier in the old days because no one gave two hoots how cronky it looked, because the fact that it was on a screen was a marvel. Now we get really worried about whether things have drop shadows and round corners or square corners or something, and that's part of the problem. Actually, we are drawn in and seduced by the visuals, and it's really quite interesting. Pausing to think on some of the tools we've seen presented recently in sort of future text is that's not where the depth is. So I sort of loved the point at the end of Raphael's presentation, just making the point about the thought about librarianship and that approach to things, which you wouldn't necessarily see. You could watch that whole thing, and if you didn't know, you wouldn't see that was there behind it.
Right.
To those who know, to know it's there, that's now more enticing because there's a depth to go for. And so that's an interesting, I don't know the answer, but there's an interesting design challenge there. And in the same way that because David Lebeau wanted some help with his tool, I spent some time with it. It transpired I was quite the wrong person to do that because I'm just not a highlighter type of person. But it's only now when I've seen what he's brought out of his, the work he's done. I'm minded to go back and get involved now because I think I can do more with it. It's just that when he presented it to me, I was stuck at level one. Is you highlight something, and I'm thinking, well, I never draw on things. So what am I highlighting and why? And so there was interesting there. So I didn't get to the richer stuff beyond it. I mean, what drew me in was the sense that it might be there, but hearing him talk about it, I left me much more excited.
So I see you have your hand, Raphael, but just briefly, Mark, this whole thing about being seduced by the visual is an absolute bunch of nonsense. And the reason I say that is coming from a gaming background. There are some games that look amazing, and of course the graphics have a level 1 sales aspect, there's no question, but it always comes down to playability, which we would call UX interaction and all of that stuff. It always comes down to that. So the way that you actually move around in the space, in this case, it's a fun play space, but it's the same as if you move around in a workspace. There is
that's for the long term. People stay. No, people stay for that. They don't. What I'm talking about is when you see something. I just noticed it along the way in which people will walk.
It's such a
it's a truth. You may not like it, but what I'm saying is you see it happening. I'm not trying to make an absolutist point, but you can't ignore the fact that when you see people and their reaction to it is overly strong on the visual, they stay for the depth.
It's not,
and it doesn't mean that
it's not a black and white. It's not a black and white thing. Of course, we see the visual. That is what we see. There's no question there. But what I'm suggesting is that it's much thinner in people's experience. Yes, they may pick up the good-looking game, but it doesn't take them that many minutes to feel how the rifle feels and the walking feels. The actual interaction comes so quickly. So I think that if we take that as inspiration,
you're talking about games. I'm thinking in knowledge tools. I accept in games there's a far closer dopamine rush, but in knowledge tools, where I've spent a long time working, I have experience to argue that it's not so immediate as a game.
Right.
So I can't. I'm not a great gamer. I can see how it works, but I have experience in a different field, and I don't think your point about games transfers as easily as you presume.
What I'm trying to say is that games have progressed, knowledge tools in generally have not. Tinderbox, which is very advanced compared to other tools, haven't really changed that much in the last 10 years, has it? Microsoft Word certainly.
Yeah, quite a lot, actually. Yeah, it's been completely redesigned once, and it has continued to evolve. But and I'm not thinking. So for those who don't know, I spend a lot of time using Eastgate's Tinderbox tool, but I've used lots of other things because in the course of it, I'm constantly being dragged by people into other tools that they're using in consulting work and things. And I speak with conviction because I've just seen it up close. That often trying to work out what's going on is unpicking people's interaction happening through the visuals of it. Which is so. This is why the gaming metaphor doesn't quite work for me, but because people sense there's something deeper underneath, they sort of want it, but they can't get to the point where they fully see the value to make the commitment to do the learning they need to make the thing stand up and shine. And funnily enough, and it's odd. Part of it is that the sort of visuals get in the way, but I think it's in part because we like things that are pleasing to the eye.
Okay, so let's go over to Raphael, because all I was trying to say is that games have moved on. We can learn from them. That's all I'm saying.
I would love to reply to that after Raphael as well, because I would say the games have not moved on, actually, and I'd love to explain them.
There are different aspects, and I look forward to hearing that very much. Okay, Raphael, for your brief comic interlude.
Yeah, there's a couple of things involved. First, commenting on both of those things, I think both sides are true. I think there's an aspect of the over-the-shoulder appeal when you're using a tool or playing a game. Somebody passes by you and they glance over. If they find it interesting, then they go the extra step to know more about it, right? And that goes both for tools and games. And then what I was going to say regarding Mark's mention of Me, the platform, is that we're doing a lot of research on information and library sciences, because when you went to a library, usually the librarian or somebody was a steward of information. They guided your They basically took you by the hand and guided you to where at least the aisle that you were looking for, the books you were looking for, is located at. And that kind of stewardship has gotten lost in digital research, pretty much. We're left to our own devices looking for information. And research is a job, it's a profession, it's a serious thing. And there's a lot of things involved in research that, you know, regular people searching Google simply don't have the skills to do. And I'm not talking about academic work. I'm just talking about, you know, how can I find out everything I need to know about this specific topic, right? So the current state of information and finding things either online or in different platforms, I find that it's quite a mess. So when I mentioned that, you know, I think the future is in libraries, it's because once the world finds out how librarians are important, we're going to run out of librarians, because they can fit in basically every single business, every single function, every single environment. They just make things better because the underlying structure is text, you know, and the profession that has had the most impact on text is librarians, period. No other profession has come closer to unveiling, you know, the possibilities of text. And that's why the work of both, you know, Paul Tley and Arthur Mee and Lafontaine has been extremely important in this area. So I think the more we look to the past and the more we develop the, you know, like Wendy Hall said yesterday, you know, these memes go on for years and years, but we never end up developing them in our timeline. We're always developing things that came before us, and that's completely fine. We're just, you know, part of the timeline, making it go forward and forward. So that's my 2 cents on that area.
I think the
put a book in reference for you.
I think that the proof of what you're saying, Raphael, is YouTube plays, you know, DJ sets for an hour and a half. I don't download music on iTunes anymore. I don't look for the individual songs. I trust the DJ. A librarian is a DJ of knowledge. You know, curators in museums, they're curators, and that is important. I think you're dead right. Yeah, Brandel, I look forward to what you're having to say, but just really briefly, in my defense, games should go much further. They're still running around with a gun, no question. My only real point was that when you start playing, if the movement and mechanics if the gameplay isn't good, you don't play the game versus the visual. That was my only point, but I would love to hear what you have to say on that aspect because of your perspective.
I also disagree on that, and I would like to comment a little bit more about games based on my past experience.
Okay. Yeah, Brandel, you first.
Cool. So,
yeah.
So my first foray into professional life was I'm from New Zealand, and a number of my friends and I started a game startup. My interest sort of quickly in what games were quickly waned, and as I realized that I enjoyed the concept of the tools and the interaction aspect of it more than I enjoyed the sort of the ludic play elements of it. But they've gone into Blizzard and that game company and places like that. So it's been interesting carrying on conversations about what games are with them as well. I would say that the actual interface mechanism, the terms on which you actually experience a video game have utterly stagnated in the last, I would argue, 20 years. And that's largely because of the sort of the expansion of the market, to do with the sort of the crystallization of the explicit input modalities. The few exceptions are things like, I would say, I've been really, really blown away by things like what's it called, Super Hot VR in Oculus Quest and others. I'm less interested and excited by Half-Life Alyx because I think Valve has done an amazing job of translating a game into a new mode, but I don't think they've done that much with it in terms of the specific benefits you get out of the platform. And but yeah, I would say that because tools for thought are primarily about that input modality, and that they're experienced through those, it's a lot harder because people kind of falsely believe that aspect of computing is done, that Windows and mouse window interfaces with mouse pointers and things like that and menus is the thing to do with computers. And they're wrong. It's not essential to go into a new platform and VR and voice recognition and stuff, but it definitely helps. And more to the point, it also sort of renders it inevitable that you have to move past those things. But yeah, like it's just really difficult for people to see those things because the software isn't those input modalities, but it's experienced through those. Yeah, I would also say like the frame rate, the responsiveness, these are also just understood to be at this point table stakes for applications, because at that sort of mechanical level, a lot of people have managed to make things work really well. So the hoops that we jump through, I built Apple.com for many years. The hoops that we and the folks who build iCloud jump through to make sure that all of your many thousands of photographs are ready within milliseconds of scrolling down a page are very, very hard to beat. And so when somebody experiences a new tool that has a transformative perspective on what it is that a photograph is, but then it doesn't have the sort of same latency characteristics, they're repulsed by it, understandably, but it means that they never get to experience what the thesis is behind those things because it hasn't succeeded in delivering on the table stakes.
I think that should be your article for Future of Text Volume 3. I'm not kidding. Let me highlight how much importance I think that is. Because when I was arguing with Mark just now, I was basically saying that the visuals matter, but the movements matter. Yes, they've been the same for a decade, absolutely. But so if you introduce an entirely new way of working, if you don't have that movement, interaction, smoothness, as you're pointing out, it's such a barrier. So how we as a community can build things that really will help, but we don't have the millions to do that last bit of polishing is a huge impediment. That's something I haven't thought about. I'm very grateful for that. And I can see Jerry itching with a comment.
Yeah. No, Raphael, thank you for praising the librarians. I quite agree with you. But on the other hand, that you triggered this, that actually what we need is constellations and technology that first of all let each individual to be a real trailblazer, exactly as Bush envisioned. And not only that, they should be able to share their trails, as Mark, you said yesterday. And no, it wasn't Mark. It was what's his name? Anyway, and those trails, not only that they never fade, but with the decentralized, you can actually make it so that you will be able to discover the person who is knowledgeable about what you want to find out about. So in a kind of crowdsourcing of librarian skills, because you're quite right, there'll never be enough librarians, even if people wise enough that they need it. So they really need to be empowered to be their own librarians for the thing that they care about. And yeah, that's so. Thank you. Thank you. That's a good angle. Yes, and
just a quick comment after Jerry. Connected to Frode's mention in the beginning of what it is that you're selling. So according to Vince Cerf and Wendy Hall, I'm just selling a new version of HyperCard, and that's completely fine.
That's pretty good, exactly.
Yes.
Please indeed.
And make it interactive, please.
No.
I'm extremely happy with that.
Hang on, Alain, just a quick moment. I don't think that's what they were saying, because things have to get reinvented. I mean, the article that Vint wrote about my work in ACM in the last month's issue, at the end of it, he says, well, that sounds like he's just trying to reinvent the web. And then he goes into the reasons not. So both Vint and Wendy are extremely open to new ideas. But of course, it's charming for them because of their history to see how it relates. That was not in any way intended as it's just a blah, 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 a HyperCard thing. It really wasn't. But that's a whole...
No. But I enjoyed that either way because we did find out about HyperCard later on. But I mean, I would love to get in touch with Bill Atkinson to present it to him and to hear his thoughts on it as well. So if any of you have a contact with Bill, I would love to connect with him to show how we've been going through it.
It's difficult to get to him. Bruce Horn is one of my close friends. He worked on the Finder of the first Mac, and he knows Bill Atkinson, of course, well. But Bill is kind of in a different life now. I've desperately tried to get him both to the symposium and to the book, and it's just not happening, unfortunately. But if we can manage it, that would be a great reason. Yeah, sorry, Alain. Alain, so I can't pronounce your name in French. How do you prefer that non-French people pronounce your name?
You can say Alain because it's difficult for English people to say Alain in French, but everyone can say Alain if it's French or Frenchy, but Alain is okay for me. Okay. Just go ahead for Alain.
All right.
My point is, Bill Atkinson, I met him at around 19s when Apple was promoting the HyperCard, and now, as far as I know, he's just promoting e-cards. Does he change completely? But he knows that he has changed the world at that time, because if you look, HyperCard is just not HyperCard; it's also a language behind, and this behind you have a structured way to display or to broadcast information. It's just not card after card. It's also behind each card some intelligence. It's important to know that. Second point is just I provide my feedback about the meeting. I start my first company at around 19 called Funsoft. And so I start with games, and I switch to application software, where we design many visual tools. And I went to the Spark Park design in Cambridge when Xerox has a research center that was around the 90s. And this we demonstrate what we have created. So we have created VIP, visual interactive programming. This just to go along with fraud is, for me, interface means part of games. That means if it's not enjoyable to play with, people will not use it. And if we see the evolution of the design of the OS and also the computer environment, we are just going more and more to animation. So if we look what are now inside the design, I'm sure that we cannot go back, except perhaps some research person that can still work with those of CPM. But now we have great tools that can map, in fact, the old interface. And what we have today is just something on top of text. For me, games, animation, it's something that it's inside the human, and then they love to play with something that enjoy them to play all the time with some nice tool. That's my feeling. Also about the timeline, there are some research from Yahoo, early moment of internet, where they try to promote XML. And with the XML, they want to let people use part of the text. And Wikipedia is the first platform where most of the text, as far as I know, is saved in XML format that lets the research, but also making another view of the Wikipedia information. And going to timeline, it's an easy task because everything is normally designed to let people view information with other aspect or other anchor. Thus, today, what was I think it's important to understand, and I have also a background in the business. And Quidsi, it's also something that I want to, let's say, make as a nice tool to use. And I say tool and not just an app, is because we want user playing with something to have result. And when I went to the academia, and I have many friends in the academia also, is they look for research and they want always more and more and more, and making the stuff making it even bigger, and they can be lost in some aspect. And when I see behind your GUI, you have your library, and behind your library, I'm sure you don't know what are inside each page. But what the people want when they do research is that the computer aggregate everything about the history and the legacy. But as we say that, is the legacy really interesting for the future? Yes, if there are some link that you want inside your past. And I think if we can share only the history of or the navigation, and if I can share my story with the history of yours, I'm sure that we can cross and see some stuff that can let the user, everyone, understanding more and more about some topic because you went somewhere where I didn't want. So that's my idea. It's not just sharing the content, but sharing also the way you search and what you have. If you have spent some time on some aspect, you have to highlight something. Yes, if we can just use this strip of information, I'm sure we will make a giant jump. That's my point.
Can I just quickly respond to that? Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Is that this is the whole thing, that this is why the Commons-based IPFS Web3 makes all the difference, because that means that all the interactions, all the development of any idea, whether it's yours or collaborative, it can have full provenance, trusted, verifiable provenance, not only of the authorship, but the engagement. That really is the real game, because there's just so much value could be derived from just that. Exactly. I really appreciate you emphasize that, because it's not just the result that is interesting, the path, because that path, that history actually gives you the rich linking into where it actually, the mycelium, where it all came from. So that is the most significant change, really. Is don't have this sort of, we don't know what it is because it's presented, but can I believe it? Make that actually full audit trail. That is important. Yeah, thank you.
On that point, I just wanted to say that in this community, on and off over the years, so often it comes back to timelines. And the basic notion is that if Apple and Google, with respect, spy on us, why can we not spy on ourselves? The benefit of recording everything we say, every browser tab we go to, every link, every word we write, plus all the recordings of these meetings, plus everything else. Because I have a professor from when I studied in Syracuse, New York, Ed Leahy, who is a bit of a genius, and he came into our group about 2 years ago here, and he started saying the stupidest thing, and he's not a stupid man, so I wondered what he was on about. He was saying we need something like GPS for knowledge, and that makes no sense. And then I realized that we do have one thing, and that is time. Like, a lot of knowledge has some kind of a time element. So if we can put the time onto it, it would be so valuable. And one of the things, for instance, would be, let's say today we have a breakthrough here. How interesting would it be to see what the weather was like the previous week for us? All kinds of information that is time-based. So what came together for these people to have this breakthrough? So if we can collaborate on that somehow, I think that would be absolutely wonderful. Raphael, you were next on the actual queue. Sorry about that.
Sure. I want to jump back a little bit on the gaming and then connect it to text. I think it's going to be a nice parallel. So in video games, there's this guy who created the Bardo's taxonomy of players. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. He basically separates player types into 4 categories. There's the killers, the achievers, the socialites, and the explorers. Basically, killers, they want to be first in leaderboards and ranks. They want to be, getting the first place. Achievers, they want to complete everything that the game has to provide. So all the experiences that the game has, the list of achievements, they want to complete everything. The socialites use the games as a social platform. So they just go into the game and they talk to other people. And the explorers, they want to see the visuals, the environment, and explore the terrains, the world, and things like that. And out of those 4 categories, 3 of them are based on, I want to say, for example, if we take Blizzard Entertainment and their games, basically everything related to soundtrack, to artwork, to animation, and to environment, those are always praised very highly. But everything that comes to gameplay is criticized every single time. So gameplay is never going to be perfect, and it's never going to be one size fits all. but everything related to the art side of games are experienced as art. So I think if we had like a taxonomy for the way people write and experience text, we would have, the calligraphers, the marginalia, the note takers, the citationists. We would have all of these different people that fit into different contexts, and they're all part of the ecosystem of writing. And I find that some people are going to be more artsy, some people are going to be more documentalists. But it always ends up as this part of the whole ecosystem. And I think that's important to know and to kind of organize and structure, because it connects to how we can explore the future of text, both the community, but also how we can end up showcasing different kinds of people from different areas that are also related to text, because there's completely different experiences that relate to this one topic.
Wonderful. Look at the notes. This is your next article, but you got to do PhD level research on it. Mark, you're sequentially up.
Okay, I'll try and go quickly. It was just something that sparked by, well, first of all, I really enjoyed Alain's sort of backstory and summary of some really fillers some nice gaps and things. Passing reference of sort of XML and Wikipedia and timelines is one of the things that is interesting, is certainly in the context of Wikipedia, is actually how unuseful the timeline is, certainly as a researcher. It tells me what happens at a certain state. So I can take a document, I can, as it were, with a scrubber, I can scrub from character 1 to character N, but unless a human has bothered to say why they pressed the button at that point, it tells me nothing at all. And that is that you see the same now in modern sort of Google Cloud Docs and Microsoft Cloud Docs. So the digital dark age is upon us is there because, of course, we assume that somebody else is writing that important stuff down, and evidence would suggest we aren't. So there's an interesting point there. Another aspect of timeline though coming out of that is I can't recall the URL of it now, but there was somebody who was at Hypertext 2019. Was it Stefan? Somebody anyway had made a Wikidata. Basically, it's a specialist Wikidata query that actually is a sort of history of hypertext and wants it filling out. That's quite interesting. The problem with Wikidata is that it's probably a little more hard-edged in terms of the provenance of the data you put into it. So half the problem using these tools is if you're trying to restore history, if you're trying to put metadata in, you're assailed by people saying, well, what is your right to put this in? Because, at some point you've got to put the first thing in the ground. And that's another interesting problem for collaborative systems. Anyway, I'm interested to see what Brandel has to say.
So I was gonna talk a couple of points on it. I'm fascinated by this recognition that there are sort of distinct sort of functions within text, and it reminds me of my wife has recently been reading How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler and Charles Van Doren. For anybody who hasn't read it already, it's a phenomenal, as well as a bunch of sort of insights from Walter Ong about what it is that reading is and all the different things that reading has been, the way that it's sped up massively, and the impact that has on what our sort of cognitive psychological expectations of text are is really important for understanding what we maybe want to do to support the different modalities that text probably needs to be kind of understood in terms of. So yeah, that's what I actually have the next week off, and one of the things I'm planning to do is build a virtual reality text reading system, which is more devoted to being able to read things that are like a Marshall McLuhan, these very dense gnomic kind of proclamations that are very interesting but need time to settle, rather than focusing on speed and velocity. So I absolutely agree that sort of taxonomic detail is very much needed, and I would love to see the way in which some of those varying needs are kind of then consequently addressed by the design of the systems that come out of it. The other point that I wanted to talk about was this idea of, within the context of things like timelines, within the context of people sharing information, one of the things that's been really eye-opening and frankly humbling for me is in my interaction and dealing with Safari, as other parts of the company inside Apple, is that this monomaniacal obsession with security and privacy is not just a sales pitch. It's something that is carried through, so that the reason why people aren't allowed to put their browsers onto an iPhone, for example, is because Safari, in order to work properly at all, is an incredibly privileged application, and Apple is not comfortable with giving people the keys to the castle in the way, because most of the exploits come through Safari actually, in one way or another. And so one of the challenges that when people are sharing information is the risks for disclosure that come as a consequence of being the internet, the sort of the wild network of networks of things like that, is such a vastly untrusted space in terms of the things that people can do to each other through the various kind of nozzles and funnels that are made available for the best of intentions. It's not a reason not to do it. It's not a reason not to try, but it's an interesting thing to consider in the context of what kinds of things can go wrong as a consequence of people recording and passing this data around to each other. And to that end as well, it's been really interesting recognizing the vast disconnect between what Safari thinks pages are and what I, as a person who makes pages even for Apple itself, think pages are. And that's reflected in the sort of the taxonomic density of the HTML specification around things that seem like they're to do with academic publications versus what commercial websites are actually often comprised of at this point, which people refer to as div soup. So yeah, sorry, I'm done. Thanks.
No, you're not done. Many things. First of all, what you said there was another really good chunk of something, right? We should have the means where the stuff you just said is privileged in a transcript, because that was useful. A lot of what I say is kind of semi-moderator's waffle. It shouldn't have the same level of transcription. But also, I have to say, yesterday when you saw the brief run through of the author and reader software, you saw the map thing, right? So on one level, it's just text on a page anywhere, super simple. But it has this characteristic that if the text that is in the definition is in another node, then it draws a line. To have that via visual meta in your VR environment would be the most insanely interesting thing, at least from my perspective. If we could come up with some kind of commonality, not for graphs that say the truth, but graphs that say glossaries, which are clearly subjective, that would be really, really fun. Over.
Yes, it reminds me of James Burke's Knowledge Web, which I think is fascinating, in particular because of the way that it's so explicitly qualitative and subjective, and it makes me want to do more, because one of the problems is that when you have a subjective but relatively scarce kind of presentation, then it is given the veneer of objectivity. One of the things that I would really like is to be able to show enough sort of potentially conflicting information in that way that it renders that subjectivity clear. So yeah, super exciting.
Alan's notion of playlist of documents a little bit comes into this. Raphael's point about librarians comes into this, because if we can have these chunks of spaces of, this is what I think, James Burke, connections. He was probably the only one who said no to be interviewed for Doug's thing. Not because he was being difficult, he was just super busy. Super interesting work that he does. But you see, so with visual meta, what I'm trying to do is two things. One, when it comes to documents, put it visibly at the back of the book. If it's important, don't hide it, right? Just don't do that. Secondly, it has to be so super easy for human and machine to read. And it has to be, we're also looking at how to do visual meta for the web, which is a very bizarrely different challenge. But the really key thing is the copy and paste operation. When you copy, of course, the clipboard contains all kinds of stuff, and it's actually hard as a developer to know what it is, but that's another long discussion. But to be able to take something from different environments So we have these opportunities for the different interactions. I mean, Jerry's notion of a knowledge graph is very different from my notion of a defined concept graph, but they should be able to talk to each other. And even in the map view that we have, you can have citations. So each definition can have a citation or many if you want to. And that is yet another way where people can start playing. Interaction-wise, my dream is, and I think Facebook has done the most amazing job of educating the general public to use computers more, especially with pictures. You know, people actually like to tag their pictures from a party with things. If we can provide equally fun interactions to tag their knowledge in a useful, connected way, and that can go anywhere, that would be amazing. Raphael.
Yes, I wanted to quickly jump back to the topic of augmented reality and virtual reality. I think they're both extremely different in how we engage with the environments. For VR, I've heard some friends, you know, they want to create a safe room in their house where it's for VR only. And a safe room it's a room that is empty, and you have, you know, that you have cushions around as well, so that when you move, when you put the VR glasses in, you're a different universe, right? So you have to be able to experience that place, like in the most possible way. And you're completely disconnected from reality when you go into VR, and that makes a lot of possibilities. That makes it possible to do a lot of different things, because our brain is easily fooled to think that, you know, you are really experiencing that, and VR provides that experience. But I'm more interested in AR. I think AR has the most possibilities of real world use as an augmentation engine for the things that we experience on a day-to-day basis. So even though I'm making a digital platform, we have always thought about a physical, how it would work in a physical environment using physical things. So a lot of the ideas for me and for the cards came from, you know, index cards. That's why they flip front and back, that have information. And basically, if we have, like Fred was saying, like if we can tag things, you know, in the real world, AR makes it so, you know, we can extract more information from the things that we are experiencing, even though we might need some sort of glasses at the moment. But who knows, eventually every object will be possible to do some kind of either holographic text thingy, or maybe it's going to be in our retina. I don't know. But I mean, if we get the interface either right or out of the way, if we have no interface at all and we have, you know, augmented world with
such thing as no interface. No such thing as no interface. Even in your own brain,
there is a book called. I understand. I know, but there's a book. There's a book called No Interface, which is really fun because it's a blank book, and it talks about how interfaces are horrible.
How do you open the book? Aha, interface. Anyway,
through an interface flipping.
Alain, I see you have your hand up, but just really quickly, I want to profess my absolute complete stupidity. And that is with the whole VR thing. I just realized now, sitting in front of you guys, because, you know, I'm a Mac freak. There's an iPad, there's an iPhone here, and you guys are on my 13-inch. With Apple glasses, clearly the glasses will know when I'm looking at an Apple device, and it will privilege that, and it won't put any crap on it. So that means that with my normal Apple VR glasses, AR, excuse me, I'll be able to see you guys and interact, text, everything crisp, but then the stuff that is away will be from that. I think that's going to be an absolute killer, where it's not either or. You can do your real work, but you got something on the wall as well. Never thought of it. That's how stupid.
Yeah. I love that.
Please.
Yes, I have 2 points. First, about the meta. Just wondering, could see that, as you know, we let user take snippets and create a story with documents but also some text, and that can be valuable text. And we are thinking about adding the NFT for some text. And I think something that is not really extensively let's say discussed is how we can add NFT to text, because there are some valuable information that will be close to the Ted Nelson vision to let all snippet belonging to the authors, and then the text can be going everywhere on the internet or any place, but we know that there are someone behind the text. And I think if for Meta is for me is more a technological aspect to try to organize information for some others. But I think the copyright is also something important. And I think if you add the NFT or something close to the NFT, the value to tag or to add meta, but also to let the user being the real author or something, will let perhaps you to expand the use of meta. That's a feedback. We are thinking about adding perhaps the NFT inside Quidsi, because if you share or if you transfer, or if you broadcast knowledge, it's perhaps normal that people can also have the copyrights associated to the content. First point. Also in Quidsi, you will have something like Spotify. That means you can take part of the text inside a playlist and create a new playlist. And then it's important to bring to the new playlist the source and also the author copyrights. That's something that we think that will be perhaps important, that make something going further in the text world. Second point I want to add is, all the AR and VR, I'm really interested in. I love to see what is coming. But I've also experienced the release of the 3D on the TV. And everyone said 3D was the future and so on. And the market didn't follow. This, for me, Meta is perhaps on the position where it can succeed, but also can be a total mess, because there are so many money that will be in this world, that there are so many experience that people will not understand perhaps the value and the experience and also the benefits. And the value is just to understand, but the benefit is it's for them. And that what just integrate that in their everyday environment. That's for me a question. And I will watch everything about Meta and Metaverse and whatever could be the name. It will be perhaps a new technological layer, but I'm not sure that the public will follow easily and rapidly.
Yeah, that's interesting. And Brenda, please respond to that. I just want to say I put in a link to the Onion article where Microsoft patents zeros and ones. It jokingly reminded me of what you were saying with NFTs of text, but of course you're talking about, a bigger piece of knowledge. It just reminded me of that Onion from many years ago.
Okay. Oh, on that subject, something that I was really fascinated by was the realization that Borges' celestial categorization scheme was actually a satirical response to Utley and Fontaine's work, which was also the same sort of motivation for Bush in As We May Think. He was definitely motivated by seeing the Mundaneum and all of the work that was happening over there, and it was really funny to realize that Borges went in one direction and Bush went in the other. So you can understand and interpret sort of categorization and sub sort of disambiguation to sort of ad absurdum kind of levels, as well as seeing the good in it and trying to make use of it. From the inside track of Silicon Valley and
also, so my work within Apple is related to some of this stuff as well. I would say that in the context of other companies that have attempted to do VR, I spoke with a number of and actually interviewed at Google VR at the time when that was happening last. And the reason why it imploded, to my mind and to many of the people who left in sort of frustration and disgust, was that Google was trying to build a market before it was building a value proposition for why people would be in it. And that was very much the same thing with 3D television as well. People were sort of piling on their values, like we want to make this stuff, rather than thinking about why anybody would want to have it, whether you want to call what they would do with it consuming or not. And so one of the things that I'm really conscious of in terms of things like AR/VR, and one of the reasons why I'm really interested in text, as I go into in my video about my word processor, is that you need to have reasons to use it, and those reasons can't just be solving pre-crime, Minority Report style. They actually have to be the mundane things that most of us do with computers most of the time. And so that means that there needs to be a response to what text processing and both in terms of output of producing it, as well as input and understanding and comprehending sort of bodies of text. There has to be a benefit there for people to get. And I actually don't think Meta definitely has not enunciated that in a way that's actually, I think, adequately compelling. It's, again, this sort of communication of the organizational values and priorities. We need to get you into this for our reasons, rather than having successfully kind of communicated why that's actually attractive for the people who they would need to draw in. Hopefully, if other companies join that sort of race into these platforms, they will have a better value proposition. But I think organizationally, it's a challenge for big companies to realize how big an ask it is to pull people into what VR is. In large part, actually, because there are lots of aspects of it that are simply worse. You were talking about whether an Apple device would prioritize the stuff happening around an Apple. It's potentially true, but it depends a lot on the mechanics of what those things do. This kind of device, this is an Oculus Quest, doesn't have the pixel pitch. It doesn't have the resolution that would mean that pass-through view of the real world would be adequate. You can build things that are augmented reality that way, but the sort of the practical consequences of it and what you can do with it depend immensely on how well a job of implementation you do of either having passed through video or other things like that. And we're probably 10 years away from everybody sort of getting those things good enough not to be immensely important in terms of people's subjective experience of any platform like that.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm finished. Thanks.
On that last tiny little detail, I was more saying that if there's an Apple device, no AR stuff will be there. So we have that quality. So we have stuff in the background. That's all. But on your bigger point, just to be very, very personal, that is exactly why I invented Visual Meta. I'm not a big person doing a big thing, but the reasoning is exactly what you said. First of all, my two dear friends, Doug and Ted, both geniuses, much bigger than I'll ever be, they didn't have an input and output. Ted's work never had an output. It didn't connect to the world. He wanted a new world. Secondly, you need to do something that is demonstrably useful. So when all the years and many dialogues, particularly with Mark Anderson, in the beginning, hating PDF because it's frozen, then realizing it is actually what's used in academia, that is the workflow, and let's make the frozenness a benefit. So I could imagine Meta being a great lobby, but why do we even need a great lobby? I mean, the way that I'm seeing you guys now is a bit boring. You're just rectangles. But what would be the actual benefit for me to put on a headset to see you in a larger shape? There just wouldn't be any, because your bodies would be wrong, or they would be weird, because you're all sitting in different kinds of chairs in different kind of ways. So it'd be very, very odd. So it'd be very fake. It's like Second Life kind of a thing. So
I was about to say that every MMORPG has been a metaverse. Like gaming has done meta for a long, long time.
But yeah, so the thing that everybody here keeps saying, things have to be open and connected, it's just ridiculous. And when I'm pushing on the Visual Meta It is not the fact that it's based on BibTeX. It is anything can be on there. Please just write it down, and let it be moved around. The whole idea of visual meta is that in 1,000 years, someone comes across some sort of online media or printout, and they have this stuff. And at the top, I don't know if you know this, some of you do, it actually says on normal size font in plain English, "Hi, this is visual meta. It's intended to do this." It's basically a thing and what that thing equals. Language will change over time, but it's not compressed for codey stuff. So sorry, you just made me go off on a complete.
I think it's a good point you make there, but it's like in the same way as PDF is just where we're stuck at the moment. Well, in a sense, is it PDF or a Word doc? BibTeX was a choice between BibTeX and RIS, and of the two, BibTeX probably is, I think, better used and understood of the two interchange formats. Is it good? No. But another thing that I was thinking on actually the talk yesterday is that often from the technical perspective, we look at visual meta as a sort of metadata thing. But I'm when working on it, was very conscious of the fact that one of the next things is, for instance, to get visual meta into something like an arts journal, where technology is just a sort of tool that stands between you and what you do, not something with which you're so closely associated. So just having something that someone actually can read, whether it's in the PDF or sort of extracted or print out on paper, I think is terribly important. For the long term, who cares? One of the things about BibTeX is you can say it's such a pot mess that hopefully it will upset someone so much they will write a far better storage system for that sort of data. But we're not there now.
That's true. So in the last 15 minutes we have here today, I guess we should talk about how to move forward, but I think we have good agreements. We still have our Monday, Friday meetings, which is really lovely and very flexible. And then we're going to try to organize having the monthly meetings. We also need different kinds of journals. I'll be pushing, of course, on writing it at my own author and exporting it as a PDF. But if we want to use different media too, I think that is very worthwhile. I don't own this community. I'm very happy to have started it, but we all need to own it. So if someone wants to put it in a different thing, that should absolutely be done. The only requirements I would beg for is interrelation, linking, interoperability, whatever, some way to refer to things. And that's why yesterday towards the end, I was talking about the whole addressability point. You can't address something if you can't give it an address. So let's keep talking, let's keep recording, and let's try to do some level of building. Adam was here today. He took Mark Anderson's cleaned up version of all the papers of the hypertext ACM proceedings, put it into a really lovely timeline. One of them was based on my design, but then he did one that was significantly better. But the really cool thing is when you view it, you hit the tab key on the keyboard and it toggles between them and you have the same item selected. I just think that's just such a powerful thing. So there are things we can build together, things we can test together. But I really, really think we're now at the point after 10 years of this symposium, let's really value our record. Anyone else have anything? What's that? Yeah, everybody's faces froze, but yeah, thanks for that, Raphael. Yeah, I mean, like Brandel, you said you work at Apple, and obviously we're all in awe of someone working at Apple because it's such a fortress. It's really hard to reach in and out. I mean, Windsurf has emailed Tim Cook twice about visual meta, and with the hope that he would send it to some lieutenant and it would land somewhere in the Pages team. But both Pages and Word, because now I have an insider at Microsoft looking at the Word people, they can't actually deal with visual meta inputs because you cannot paste an intelligent object. You cannot paste a citation. Citations are treated as some extra site thing. So that's very, very interesting. But also, if you export to PDF from Pages or Word, even if you use the styles that are headings, the headings are not there in the PDF. It's really, really bizarre. PDF is awful, but it's also potentially very powerful. So, Brandel, what I want to do with you is to give you this community of support for your ideas to talk about, so you have more ammunition with the people you work with who actually make a difference. So that would be
thank you. I look forward to the extent that I can of being a conduit. I actually speak. I wouldn't say regularly, but I have been in contact with the Pages team in the past. One of the things that I built for the benefit of building the Wikipedia Ads Gallery thing was something I called a Webgliser, which takes the rendered DOM element and turns it into a 3D transform hierarchy that can turn into a series of objects that you were able to kind of manipulate and turn around. And as it transpires, the Pages team rebuilt their own text rendering system from the ground up in that same way, not for any interesting purposes, but just so that they could get the kerning better, which is fine. So yeah, I'd be happy to see what I can do to find out where people are thinking about these things, and to the extent that I can communicate back sort of the sentiments and preferences. One of the things that's really interesting and occurs to me as you were sort of mentioning that is that the value system of these applications is something that is intensely important, but often ignored even by the people implementing them themselves. They are so enmeshed in the value system of what a document, for example, constitutes, that they don't really have the ability to shift it, because they say, oh, the code base doesn't support it. What that means is that the value system that the code base is in support of is unable to accommodate it. And that's a really fascinating distinction. But that said, that's not to say that that it can be possible to kind of nudge people in the direction of understanding and recognizing these kind of distinct sort of purposes and artifacts as being important sort of goals for either substantial rewrites or subsequent sort of or successors to that same kind of application or context.
By the way, and this is a secret, the book is coming out on the 9th of December. We're supposed to have a preview. We had one yesterday. I'm still waiting for the forward because I've invited Ismail and he's been very busy. Brandel, if you want to write something, if you can do it in the next week, I'll sneak you in. Just don't tell anyone it's possible.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Thank you. Yeah, my wife was jokingly suggesting that I try to sneak something in. I'll definitely give that serious thought. Thank you very much.
That could be her punchline to the joke. Mark,
I was going to say, Fred, just a quick sort of reflection. I was smiling somewhat as you were describing this thing about Word or Pages or either or both not being able to, basically not exporting to PDF with the headings. I thought, crikey, this is like sort of early days of Web 1.0, and people say, no, really, you should use headings. It has a purpose. And at the time when we were struggling as to whether the tags were supposed to be uppercase or lowercase, and eventually, sanity arrived. And now, and the fact that in most modern browsers, if you go and look at the code, the thing it actually shows you when you ask for that isn't what the original machine or person wrote, but a tidied up version based on extracting all that semantic, and that's a wonderful thing. So perhaps if word processors could get with the movement and sort of get to that level of structure, I think that'd be marvelous.
Brandel, before I forget, do you know Will Thimbleby?
Will Thimbleby?
Yeah. He worked on the... He's at Apple. He worked on the, pull up from the side to do a note thing. His dad was my advisor for my master's. So that's quite cute. Just in case. I know it's a big company. Anyway,
there's a directory. I can look him up.
All right. Yeah, no, it's just funny in case you happen to have run across him. Okay, well, I look forward to seeing some of you in monthly, some of you in weekly, whatever suits. And please also keep thinking about this thing I go on and on about, some kind of a journal thing. It's...
are we going to have the first monthly in December or January?
January. I think that we should try to plan it for the 9th of December, because 9th of December, of course, is Doug's 50th anniversary demo thing. And also Surf and Ismail are doing a presentation. I can't remember what it is. So that's the official launch of the book. So then we can say we're launching the book and we have this series. And before that, I think we will have a Google Docs kind of a sheet with who is lined up for what sessions. and we're a bit organized, and we need to really think about how to do the newsletter. Currently, it'll be something quite simple, but if anyone has more exciting ideas, let's use it. And I think we can productize it, probably as a free product. But if we create some kind of a workflow to create a useful journal that has real expandability, linkability, all that goody stuff, there's a real need for that. And a company couldn't do it because it's so simple. There aren't any competitive advantages, IP, or any of that stuff. But I think we as a community can cobble something together that's super simple, super connected, and useful.
Yeah, if you manage to rummage up someone who's the time and interest to sort of be an archivist, I think that would be interesting. I mean, for instance, a useful thing I can see is actually just to, for instance, to listen through the recordings and actually effectively just do a bit of curation on the chat. Because often someone's speaking, and after they've spoken, they'll put something in that actually relates to what they spoke about. So the two aren't aligned, and an automatic extraction is not going to make that. Or it may be, it's a kind of thing of someone who's familiar with the conversation that's going on, just being able to perhaps add a little extra meta comment to it to make it understandable.
Mark, you're hired.
No, that's why I brought up the dog drop thing.
Yeah,
that would actually make it co-creatable, and I'm very happy to be involved in that, because that's what I'm doing. That's one of the most tangible thing is how to integrate with hypothesis and how to actually make use of this, and that's just that is something.
I think that's great. I think we should try that. Just this whole thing about coming together to make a really easy journaling system. The first piece of software that I made that is still available is Liquid. Some of you may know it. It's super, super simple. Select text, you get options, you do something. The reason I'm mentioning it now is no company can do that because it's too damn simple. The first one we had, called HyperWords, worked as a web plugin. It was on Firefox. And then a few years later, Microsoft came out with their rectangular blue dots. We had a round silver dot, they had a blue one. They did something similar, but it was a bit clunky. Yahoo tried something, it was a bit clunky. And I don't think that's because I'm a design genius. I am definitely not that. I think it is because we didn't have any bosses. So there wasn't that layer of management of everybody having to add value to the product. So I think it's the same thing here. We do something super simple, no points to prove, no extra stuff with people needing to put their fingers in. We may do something useful. And it is kind of amazing that we are in a point in time, 2021, where the world needs a simple journaling system that is robust, that is on our computers. It's not on a blog. It's not locked away in somebody's database. It's literally...
It's called paper.
Exactly. Exactly. We're talking about magical paper, Raphael. That's exactly. We have lost so much in the transition to digital. Now we need to claw some of it back.
I love David LeBeau showing us actually. I just cracked me up completely when he showed me he'd done all this work in his system. Then he printed it out, cassette and display. Yes.
I loved what he did. I loved it. That's how I think when I see any kind of book. I want to be able to do that, like instantly.
It showed a lot of intellectual honesty.
Physical world.
What's that, Jerry?
Yeah.
But you don't want to actually print it out.
No,
and cut it out.
no.
That's exactly.
That's where digital comes in. That's where
that's the whole point.
VR maybe comes in, and you see everything.
Well, it's either VR or UbiComp. It's where Mark Weiser was talking about pads and tabs, and the fact that you need these things to be cheap enough not to matter. Something that I've sort of tried to tell people at Apple all the time is these are not tabs because they cost $1,000 each. You can't treat them like the way that Weiser wants to treat those things because they need to be cheap enough not to matter, and the relationship that sort of flows from it. So yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, interesting. I think.
All right, time.
You mentioned Apple and iPhones. I just have to say the Apple AirPods Pro with this spatial audio is such a revelation. I often work at my club and I need headphones, and the fact that the audio is here, not everywhere, it means it's more relaxing. but it's so well done that if I sometimes look away, oh shit, they're not on. It's on the actual machine. Everybody is hearing what I'm doing. Happens so often. So that situated in spaceness, just auditory, not even all the great stuff you're talking about, Randall, it was such a revelation, and it's almost science fiction. We live in a world where that's possible. Wow. What next things are we going to see?
Well, I'm still waiting for my flying car.
Yeah. Oh, you got Twitter instead.
It's in. You have to go to Dubai for that.
Well, the old saying, we were dreaming of flying cars and ended up with Twitter.
Yeah.
I think it's what's his name? The PayPal founder. Yeah.
I think that's an actual interesting point because, I drive a Tesla. Very lucky to drive a Tesla. And yeah, it doesn't fly. That's a matter of energy and lots of other things, whether it could do that. But, when I drive to Southampton, part of the drive, I'm checking emails. The car's driving itself. Why was self-driving cars not as thought through? Was it just not as sexy as the ones up in the sky?
I have a thought on that. So self-driving shouldn't have been done for cars. It should have been for buses, because buses, they have timesheets, they have correct routes, they have structure, they have a parking location. But you don't have a business with buses, you have a business with cars, but it doesn't make sense to have self-driving on cars because people are unpredictable and the routes they go about are unpredictable. But everything about buses and public transport is predictable, like to the second. So self-driving makes sense for public transport, but it doesn't make sense for cars. But as a business, it makes sense for cars, but it doesn't make sense for public transport.
A friend, Tom Standard, just wrote a book on the history of transportation. I will talk to him about exactly what you said. That's interesting.
Yeah. But Frode, those flying cars were, of course, self-driving. That's the whole point.
Yeah, well, it will happen. We looked at, my family is Norwegian, and we looked at boats and all of that stuff, and we looked at electric boats. You can buy an electric boat now, but they're very, very slow, and they're very, very expensive. So it's exciting to see the beginning of that. And there are some friends who are interested in aircraft. Electric planes are coming. We're at that transition point. And yes, some of them will be self-driving. It will. So we can sit here and joke. But then again, how many years ago could we have joked about having these devices, right? So it's all happening. It's all good over time. And I'm so grateful for you guys.
But also, if I had a flying car, going to Southampton, I'd still be stuck in an air lane. I'd just be stuck in a different sort of queue. So I'm not sure that it actually solves everything.
On that bombshell.
The invention of the ship was also the invention of the shipwreck.
Okay. All right, fine. Back to reality here. Did you know that the elevator shaft was invented 4 years before the elevator? The Otis elevator was invented as the first safety elevator for humans. It had the mechanism so it wouldn't crash. Physical lifting of materials, such as goods, was done many, many years earlier. So when they built the Cooper Union building in New York, I can't remember his first name, I think it's Peter or something boring. He said, there will be a lift because buildings have to get taller in New York. So we're going to put in a shaft in the middle of the building with the expectation that someone will build a lift shaft. He was slightly wrong because he made it round, and of course they're not round lifts today. But in terms of us trying to do foundational infrastructures, it's a little bit of build it and they will come. Shall we end it on that note?
Well, yeah, and the guy who invented the hologram invented it before the laser was invented that made the hologram possible. So sometimes
and virtual reality was invented before photography. Charles Wheatstone's first stereo pair was before the first photochemistry record.
Awesome.
That will have to be part of your monthly presentation. Maybe you start with that.
And remember the Memex. The Memex was invented before the computer. Really?
Yeah.
Yes, it was. It was.
And remember libraries, they came before everybody.
Yeah. And remember, the can opener was invented many, many years after the tin can.
Yeah.
Okay, enjoyed it.
Hey, in 10 years, we'll
have
look
a nice weekend.
In 10 years, we'll look at this recording and look at what was invented in the meantime in the wrong order. Have a good weekend, everybody. Thanks for today.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Hi.
I hope
Thank
to
you.
see